uncertainty always increases the demand for certainty. I mean, the 60s happened because we were prosperous. You could drop out. You could be a high school dropout in the 60s. You could quit your job, quit your life, and know that you could drop back in and get a job when you needed to. That the relative economic security of the times allowed people to live looser lives. It still was a relatively small percentage of the population that did that, but that was allowed. And I think the uncertainty of times always creates a desire and a need for some kind of certainty. I mean, my generation, we grew up with this sense of potential and what was going to happen, and we grew up out of the prosperity created by our parents and grandparents, and that generation, we benefited by that. Well, that's changed. The younger generation today, and I'm be 64 this year, so younger covers a lot of territory. In astrology, if you're under 40, you're a young astrologer, basically. But that's not evident that things are automatically going to get better and more prosperous and we'll have more choices. And I think that creates an uncertain environment in which the certainty of yes, no answers, the deterministic model of astrology, is attractive.
Two things. The analog that works for me is the concept of the subatomic realm, where particles are not particles, they're particle waves. That there's this, in the quantum realm, there's a particle wave duality, and light travels as a wave until you measure it, and at the moment you measure it, the quantum wave function collapses into a particle for the moment of measuring, and then it turns back into a wave, and it's always a particle wave duality, but our consciousness can only perceive one at a time. In fact, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle stated clearly that the more at any given moment we know about the waveness of a subatomic particle, the less we know about its particleness. The more we know about where a subatomic particle is, the less we know about where it's going. So that particle wave, we can only know one or the other, and the more we know about one, the less we know about the other. Well, the analog here is that last night, how many people actually saw Mars? Did many of you see Mars? So Mars is a particle when we're looking at it. It's a huge particle, but it's a particle. The moon is a particle when we look at it. But the moon is also a wave. It's a 30-day, 28-day cycle. Mars is a 2-year or 680-day cycle or wave. Pluto has 4 cycles per millennium, about 250 years, 245 years. So planets, like subatomic particles, are particles and waves. Now, what this has to do with the determinism question is that the more we know about the particleness, the less we know about the waveness. Fate is to particle as free will is to wave. And so as we've gone through the 60s and the rise of Dane Rudhyar's what's now called humanistic astrology and all of its outgrowths over the past 40 years or so, it's almost like as we've learned more about the free will side, in order to balance it out, because it's both, it's this resurgence of the determinism has to come in also. And I would caution any astrologer to focus on only one side or the other, because when we focus on it's all free will and there's no fate involved, we're missing the fact that these waves are also particles. But when we focus on just these Hellenistic techniques of determinism, we're missing the fact that in the post-Newtonian quantum realm, that particles have become particle waves.